Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriela Ortega Ricketts. I am the manager of artist programs at International Documentary Association, as well as one of the organizers and stewards of Documentary Workers United, IDA's union, which is part of CWA Local 9003. For our blind and low vision attendees, I am going to describe myself. I am a white woman with shoulder length, wavy brown hair and bangs. And I'm sitting in my office in front of a bookshelf. And I'm wearing an oversized black polo shirt with the CWA 903 logo on it. And I'm thrilled to welcome Brett Story, producer and director of the new documentary Union. Brett,
Hi, everyone.
here.
Hi, it's so great to be here. Yeah, my name's Brett Story. I'm a white woman with graying brown hair in a green sweatshirt, and also in my office trying to hide the mess. And I have a bit of a cold, so my nose is quite red. And yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, thank you for being here with us despite your cold. Um, so just going to the beginning, um, how did you get involved with this film, or how did this film come to be?
Yeah, so Union started with our producers, actually, Samantha Curley and Mars Varone. They had independently contacted Chris Smalls long before the Amazon Labor Union was founded. They contacted Chris Smalls when he was in the news in early 2020 for having led a walkout. He was then working at JFK8, an Amazon warehouse in Staten Island, and he led a walkout in the early weeks of the pandemic to protest the company's lack of COVID precautions. And within a couple of hours of that walkout, he was fired. And he started to engage in real protests, protests that caught the attention of top company brass who said, oh, we can make him the face of this protest movement. We don't have to take him seriously. He's not smart or articulate. So there was, a little bit of media attention on Chris and our producers, Sam and Mars, were in touch with him, started developing the possibility of a film. Maybe it would be about him, maybe it would be about essential workers. And then they contacted me and we started a conversation. They had seen a film. One of the films I previously made is a short film called Camper Force with Field of Vision. And it's a film about Amazon's program of targeting retirement age workers for seasonal labor. And so they'd seen that. They contacted me. We started a conversation about, this project. And that's when Chris and a few folks he was organizing with, under the auspices of a group called the Congress of Essential Workers, they decided to start a unionization effort. And they did it in a quite surprising moment. They did it in a moment that had just seen a huge loss, a high profile loss at a warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama. And that had, all sort of hopes were tied to this one unionization effort in Alabama. And then it unfortunately resulted in defeat. And it was quite striking that Chris and this small handful of workers in Staten Island would decide to start their own union effort. And that's, when we decided, let's just start filming right away. I mean, this is an opportunity to not only document a unionization effort from day one, but to also ask some really important political questions about, what how people are thinking about organized labor at a moment of tremendous union decline and union density decline. Are we seeing a moment where we're starting to see independent struggles? Is this maybe this effort illustrative of a kind of broader phenomena of a new generation of labor activists? Yeah, so we started filming, brought on our DP, Martin DeChico, and eventually I brought on a co-director, Steve Mang, and started filming with ALU in earnest.
Apologies, I'm also coughing, I think. Um, so I mean that's really I mean fascinating. I'm watching the film. there's so much trust, and you have such amazing access with you know, Chris and the rest of the organizers. And I was wondering if they were just super open to having you there, or if there was, you know, a trust building process were they skeptical of having everything filmed? How did that work?
Yeah, it was a bit of both. And I have to admit, I don't always love the word access, even though we all use it, in part because I feel like one can have access without having trust. A lot of films get sort of access to an institution or an organization or to even like a site of confinement. And it's really important that to have these conversations about what it means to be close to the people that you're filming, and that who, especially when you see them let the cameras into all sorts of vulnerable moments. And in our case, I think, we developed trust very early on in a number of different ways. One was that I think we were very transparent as a film team, as Steve and I as directors, as our producers, Sam and Mars were, to just be honest about why we cared about the story, the fact that we're people who are in solidarity with the labor movement, that we consider ourselves political and interested in political storytelling, and that we supported their struggle. We weren't going to make kind of you know, uh, faux gestures to a kind of neutrality here. We were definitely on side. So that was one thing. But I think more meaningfully, we showed up and we demonstrated this a commitment alongside a lot of workers and organizers. So to be filming in the field with this group of people meant showing up sort of almost every day and every night. Um, and in doing so when they felt quite abandoned by the rest of the media. I think because there had been this high profile loss, everyone had sort of given up on the possibilities of organizing an Amazon warehouse. And one of the struggles that the ALU and Chris faced was just feeling like no one was taking them seriously. They couldn't get politicians to come down, they couldn't get the mainstream labor movement to come down, and there wasn't a lot of media attention being paid. And here was our small independent film crew. Oftentimes it would just be Martin or it would just be Steve at the tent with the crew and with the ALU organizers. And we really showed up and we really demonstrated that we understood that this effort was important regardless of what the outcome would be. And I think to their credit, I think Chris is also really smart in knowing, and they all were, that knowing that they appreciated that we respected them and saw their struggle as valuable, but they also understood that there was value for them in having a crew kind of on the ground and there to document the good and the bad, not just there for sort of like the high moments or the PR moments.
I think the film union does a really beautiful job of just humanizing the workers, which is such maybe a silly thing, but we're all so disconnected from, you know, people just get packages at their house and there's no kind of thought behind what goes into that package
Mm,
arriving at your
mm,
house.
mm,
So I think the film is really I mean, aside from the I mean, I'm a labor organizer. Aside from the huge importance of just highlighting the labor movement and you know, and the difficulties of organizing and the union busting that goes on. I mean, the $2,000 to $3,000 a day for union busters, that's so just
totally outrageous.
outrageous. Yeah. But just showing the capitalist machine of how these things, you know, and showing the real lives of these people and who they are, I think is so important because we have to, you know, desensitize.
Mm,
We have to sensitize ourselves. We are so desensitized. And I think this film is so beautiful for sensitizing ourselves to the real people behind the you know, they say when they go to the National Labor Union, we are the people. And
mm,
I was like, hell yeah, you are the people. And
mm.
really amazing that they were able to take that into their own hands.
Yeah, and it was really important to us. I mean, it's sort of, when we were thinking about the form of the film, we knew it should be an observational form because what was truly magical was not like a set of like dramatic campaign beats, but a kind of care and solidarity that got demonstrated on a really felt level. And I think it's, there's only so many statistics you can read about like the plight of low wage workers before sort of eyes glaze over what we really need to understand, and that film is uniquely capable of expressing is sort of like the the wear on the body and the psyche of a long commute, a graveyard shift, um, the dehumanizing effects of a workplace that treats you like a robot, which we heard a number of times, and feeling that, not just being told that you're a robot, that you're disposable, but feeling that in the way that you can't even get a manager to talk to when you need to take time off to help your sick kid. The workplace is so alienating, and it also really makes people feel like they have no value, even while they're producing all the value for capital, especially during the pandemic. This is why they were called essential workers. And so part of what we really saw our job as being was not just to, again, humanize and put a face on this workplace and these workers, but also show how in this organizing space they were producing a sense of their value and highlighting their own value to each other. That was part of what was motivating them. Why would they show up at this tent day in and day out? Like they could show up and say, like, this has happened to me, and someone else be like, I got you. I know what that's like. How's your brother doing anyway? Like, let's figure this out. That was totally wrong what happened to you. And those things seem small, but they're deeply meaningful in a world that has completely abandoned most people, and it makes them feel like is organized around making people feel abandoned. And I think that that's like even more meaningful than sort of any of our attachment or not to the idea of a union is actually seeing it in this kind of felt space where people are just like it feels good to have other people be in struggle with you and show up for you and get to know you and care about you and like promise to be there for you if something goes wrong. And I just think like that's something we can do with cinema is create like a little bit, anyways, a little bit for an audience, give a sense of this world that they were creating for each other at this bus stop, at this tent during this organizing effort.
I mean, I think a moment for me that really illustrates that is all the times that they're like, hey, we have real food. You don't have to have that little, just like getting people involved in the union and in the community by just offering a basic
Emil.
necessity, a meal that really should have been provided by Amazon. And so that was really beautiful just to see that community building.
Mhm.
And so I'm curious about what the director collaboration was like with Steven.
Yeah, so Steve and I had known each other as friends, acquaintances, just within the smallish documentary community. He'd seen my films, I'd seen his films. We'd gone to a few rough cut screenings for each other, and I think we're just mutual admirers of each other's work. And when I started working on this film, I was living in Canada during the pandemic with a young kid, a 2-year-old, and it was very hard to cross the border and also maintain my full-time job. And I think that this is something we're seeing increasingly within the documentary field is just like, I mean, and it's a way that kind of mimics the organizing we see. It's just like this mentality that we should all be going it alone and single authoring works, as if filmmaking could ever happen. I mean, sometimes it does happen with one person, but that burden is really intense. And to the degree that we can make our filmmaking practices more collaborative, and then more possible to also negotiate all the other dependencies in our lives. I think it's really important. So I had reached out to Steve just knowing what a great filmmaker he is and also a cinematographer, and asked him to partner on this project, and he, to my great delight, said yes. And then it was really good to have this co-director relationship, in part because he was really on the ground. He's living in New York. I was traveling back and forth between Toronto and New York. And in this verite mode, which means that you're sort of like in the thicket with everybody and really building trust and really there for every moment, but also you can start to lose perspective. So we kind of had this like great relationship where he was like in the thick of everything, and in like a deep relationship with everyone, and I was back and forth and also watching footage from home, so I could have some of the perspective that often one waits for the editor to bring to a project, where you could say like, oh, I know that was really intense, but we're not seeing it in the footage. Or that moment that you describe, yes, here it is in this moment. And like, let's think about how that relates to what the film is about. So, yeah, I think it's, and then of course, like when you make a film with a group of people, when you bring in editors and set composers and everyone else, you're also doing something a little bit akin to forming a union, which is you're negotiating a big, hard project under a lot of pressure with a group of people, all of whom are also exhausted by the world. And so it was kind of amazing to kind of think about filmmaking practice and ourselves as filmmakers, but also as workers in relation to the organizers we were watching and learning from.
We only have a few minutes left, but I wanted to ask a few more, maybe just one or two more questions. Um, my first question, kind of off of what you just said, is has working on union and being around so many labor organizers uh, inspired, or not inspired, but made you think about organizing and unionizing your own field or practice?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a new thought. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I've been very politically involved in a lot of kinds of struggles. I've been part of unions. I've been on strike with a union I was part of about a decade ago. And I I think I mean, I also, I come from a working class background, but then I straddle sort of two worlds. One is academia and one is filmmaking. And in both areas, it can be really hard to convince people that they're workers. And I think that's it's something interesting that I've thought a lot about. I think part of it is that there is a lot of immense privilege within the documentary sphere. Um, so there's, when people come from tremendous wealth or have access to a lot of resources, of course, they don't think of themselves as exploited. Maybe they needn't, but also they can take it for granted that that's going to be everybody's position, and it's not. Secondly, I think that we all tell ourselves and are constantly told that it's a privilege to make this work. And I think it is in a lot of ways. Like, we do this work because we love it, but because you do something because you love it does not mean you're also not exploited or deserve, um, benefits and protections. And I actually think like there's a kind of scourge of self-exploitation within the documentary sphere, and especially when the market is contracting. I think like when the market is contracting, there are fewer and fewer rewards, harder and harder to make a living. Everybody's exhausted, they work too much. And then there's this kind of a competition for ever scarce resources. And when there's a competition in a kind of freelance cultural field for scarce resources, what happens is that the people who are in a position to most self-exploit, I work all the time, kind of end up like winning those battles. And so I think that we need a union or some sort of other organizing apparatus, not just to help protect us, but also to enable us to be more collaborative and also to make the space more equitable. Because so long as we're fighting for scarcer and scarcer resources and rewarding the, able-bodied people without dependence to like get most ahead in the race, then we're not going to be an equitable space, no matter how much we, as a documentary field, pay lip service to the need for that. So, yeah, I don't think that I think my opinion on that has been pretty constant, but just watching the ALU take on this struggle and do something that they weren't supposed to do and win has just galvanized me even more. But I also don't pretend to know what that looks like. I just think that like it's very, very clear from everyone I know in this work that we should think of ourselves as workers and think about what it means to organize a kind of collective institution that will help protect our rights as workers.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so one last quick question, hopefully, is what have there been any major developments with ALU since the end of the film? It says in the end that they haven't begun negotiating yet. So what's the current status and what can we do to support?
Yeah, great. Love these questions. And there are a couple of major developments, actually. So the film came out in January of 2024. And so since then, a couple of major things. One is that there have been new elections for the executive board and presidency. So that just happened over the summer. And there's a new president of the ALU, which is Connor Spence, who's another person that you see in the film. Um, and also, big news is that the ALU has now affiliated with the Teamsters. So now we see ALU as a affiliated with the Teamsters Local One, which I think is going to be really essential because, as we see in the film, and this has continued to be true, Amazon continues to stall and refuse to go to the negotiating table. So they have yet to get to first contract, and the ALU really needs the resources of a big established union, especially strike pay, if it's going to leverage its own worker power in a meaningful way to demand that the company come to the negotiating table. And yeah, we are self-releasing this film. We are getting it to audiences. It's in theaters now in Los Angeles and New York and in select cities around the country. We'd love it when people can see the film in theaters. So please go to our website, unionthefilm.com, to find out where you can go, check out a screening, be there with other people. And then also stay tuned. There's going to be some video on demand release plans soon, and you can also on our website uh, um, uh, figure out how to have a screening or make a request to have a screening, a community screening near you. So all of those are possible, and we'd love it for people to check out the film.
Great. Everyone, unionthefilm.com. Great. Thank you so much, Brett, for talking to me. And thank you, Andrea, for doing a little sign language interpretation.
Thank you, Andrea. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.